Hello and welcome to XYPN Radio. I am Maddie Roach, your host. I'm honored to have member Linden Cornett, founder of Seagrass Financial, back on XYPN Radio. Linden is the first member to be on XYPN Radio 3 times now over our 8.5-year-long podcast. And you may recognize her name. Maybe you've listened to one of her podcasts previously, but just in the past few episodes we've recorded, Linden's name has come up as inspiration to some of our other guests, and rightfully so. Today's episode is all about what's changed about Linden's firm over the past few years since she was last on the show. And you'll hear how Linden has gone officially full-time into running her solo practice and taken a pause from her long-time career at Intel. Today, she discusses what she's witnessed change amongst her clients, both from a needs perspective and a service perspective. And I love how Linden talks about meeting her clients where they're at and how she's pivoted both her service structure and her pricing to meet them accordingly. She also talks about how tax planning is so important to her clients and how she's continued to stay up to date with her continuing education initiatives and her general interest in this industry. You can tell by Linden's comments and conversation here about how much she loves what she does. And I think that should be an inspiration to many. You're going to hear Linden talk about the systems and processes that she has in place, her reliance on Asana as her primary CRM of sorts to track her workflows, to be able to manage running a practice on her own. And although some people object to being able to have flexibility when running a solo practice and being able to take vacations effectively, Linden lets you in to how she does it. And you'll hear her discuss how she's able to take time away from her business unapologetically. We're lucky to have Linden back on the podcast, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Linden. Welcome to XYPN Radio. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me back, Maddie. I can't wait to chat with you.
Yes, Linden, I know some of our listeners are familiar both with your story because you've been on XYPN Radio twice before, but just in the past recent podcasts, your name has been dropped a number of times as a member who a lot of our members really look up to. And I have good reason to know why. But Linden, I would love for you to, before we dive in, just introduce yourself and your firm to the listeners who maybe aren't so familiar with you and your story.
Sure. So my firm is Seagrass Financial. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I'm a career changer. So I worked in the high-tech field for almost 25 years. I worked for Intel Corporation, which is, has a big site here in Oregon. I basically pivoted into opening my own financial planning firm about 8 years ago. So it was 2016. And I was still working part-time for Intel through, the first section of my opening my firm, which I'm sure we'll get to some more details about that. I specialize in working with Intel employees, as you might imagine, since I have a lot of contacts there and also a lot of familiarity with the types of plans and things that they have available. But I also work with a lot of retirees, and I have a unintentional niche working with university professors as well. So those are the kind of areas that I focus on.
Linden, last time you were on the podcast, it was October of 2018. And that, I cannot believe, is nearly 5.5 years ago. Tell me a little bit about what has changed for you just over the past 5 years.
You, I'm sure, are aware that there's a global pandemic starting in 2020. And I would say that had a pretty big impact on my life and also my business. I went from working from home and going into the office occasionally to having 4 of us at home because my husband is a middle school teacher and I had 2 kids at the time in elementary and middle school. That was a big challenge, I would say, kind of going through that whole process of, having 4 people working from the same home. And then just in the past 18 months or so, I exited from my corporate job at Intel. So I had been doing sort of part-time planning, part-time work at Intel for the first 6 or so years of having my business. And then I ended up taking a separation package about 15 months ago in January of 2023. So I had essentially stopped taking new clients because I had reached what I felt like was my capacity for working with clients while also having a corporate job. And then when I left that job 15 months ago, I just sort of opened the door to the possibility of new clients. So I ended up taking on a few new clients last year, and we'll expect to continue to take on a few new clients this year as well. Actually, last year, I believe I had 3 new clients, and this year I've already had calls with 8 prospective new clients. So that's a big change for me. But I love working with new clients. I just love that initial planning process of going from somebody who has a big mess or a big pile of accounts and questions that they don't really know what to do with, and just kind of like organizing that and turning it into something that they feel good about, and that there's always a lot of really quick wins I find with new clients, which I love that process. I also love working with my ongoing clients, but there isn't as much to do or as much to kind of teach them or change as in the first 6 months or so working with a new client.
Yes, a global pandemic and a career shift is a big change. So I really am interested, Lyndon, in what it was like to go from working at Intel for so long and part-time to going fully into the business.
Well, I had kind of stepped back pretty significantly from my work with Intel over the past 5 years. So, I worked full time for, I think, 17, 18 years. And then I moved to a part time schedule where I was working 3 days a week. And then during the pandemic, I actually stepped back a lot to almost like a consultant or as needed role, where I didn't go to a lot of meetings and I was just available to help sort of troubleshoot problems. I felt like I had already sort of stepped back quite a bit from my work at Intel, and that's why it made a lot of sense for me. I felt like to be the one to volunteer to take the separation package, because the rest of my team, they needed the job and I didn't really need it. But also my role had been reducing for quite a while. I mean, there was still times when I was able to provide input that was very valuable to my team, but I wasn't able to put in the time that everybody else was putting in. In terms of the shift from working for corporate, like a corporate job, to sort of having my own business, it's really different to have control over every little aspect of your work. So when I was working at Intel, of course, I had a manager, I had teammates, I had expectations from other people, and I had a great team, I had a great manager, and I was really able to direct the work that I did for the most part. But still, there's this like outside influence and like outside processes that you have to follow, or outside decisions that other people make that you have no control over. And one of the things that I love about running my own business is that I have control over everything, for better, for worse. So sometimes I make good choices and sometimes maybe not the perfect choice, but it's always my choice, which is something that I, really love about working for myself.
Tell us a bit about how you've managed kind of moving into that space. From the time allocation to kind of the approach that you take now with the business, have your goals changed with it?
I would say from sort of like a time blocking perspective, when I was still working for Intel, I had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that were sort of allocated for my Intel work. And therefore, I wasn't doing financial planning on those days. And so I actually did quite a lot of work on the weekends or in the evenings sometimes. One of the major changes that I made when I stopped working in the corporate world was basically to say, I'm not going to do client meetings on the weekends anymore. And I'm also not going to do evening meetings anymore. So now I basically, my calendar is available for client meetings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I know a lot of people do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but I really like having a day in between because I do a lot of prep for client meetings. So I basically do client meetings Monday, Wednesday, Friday during business hours. And then Tuesday and Thursday, I do, projects related to my business or, personal type of things, going out for lunch or having appointments or exercising or that kind of thing. So that's kind of maybe one of the bigger changes from a, time blocking perspective. I mean, I still work on the weekends, of course, but I'm not doing client meetings on the weekends anymore.
Would you be willing to share with the listeners just kind of over the past 8 or 9 years that you've been in business, just how revenue has changed and number of clients you've served has evolved?
Sure. So at this point, I'm working with approximately 45 client households. I ramped up very quickly at the beginning. I think I was something like 18 after my first year, and 20 something, or maybe even close to 30 after my second year. And then I really deliberately slowed down growth after that. In terms of those 45 households, I have a number of different service models and fee structures. So about 2/3 of those 45 clients are ongoing clients. So they have an annual fee that they pay me. And then the other 1/3 are either hourly, project based, or I do some pro bono work as well. And I do some work for family members who don't pay me. So that would be another 1/3 of clients, basically. Within the clients who I would consider ongoing clients, about 2/3 of those are investment management and planning, and about 1/3 are planning only. So they manage their own investments with guidance from me. In terms of revenue, my revenue in 2023, my top line revenue was about 230,000. The year before that, it was 210. The year before that, it was 180. The year before that, it was 130. So it's been growing. I'm kind of at a point where, like I said, I wasn't really taking on new clients for a while, and then that has ramped up a little bit in the past year or so. And I anticipate this year I'll be, somewhere between 250 and 300 in terms of top line revenue. And then my expenses are very low. They average 10 to 12,000 a year. So that's, before I count the money that I pay myself, of course.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Not everyone is willing to be as transparent as you, and I think it's a really good benchmark for folks to realize what kind of revenue can be produced, even doing this part time as long as you did. I'm interested in the two separate service models. We often coach at XYPN to start simple, stick with the boundaries you have, don't offer too much. But you've been around the block for so long, and I'm interested in your perspective about why having these two different service models is important to you and your clients.
Yeah, actually, I have 4 different service models. So, my current process with all new clients is that, I have an intro call with them, talk about, what they're looking for. I very often will recommend that they talk to another planner or two before making a decision. And then if they decide to move forward, I start out all new clients with a 15-hour planning package. And the reason I do that is because early on, I sort of jumped into an ongoing relationship with a few people that didn't end up being a great fit for me, either because, they didn't really need my services and then it was a little bit harder to unwind, or they couldn't really afford my services. And then I sort of, had to eventually kind of move them on a different direction. So the reason I do this is basically in 15 hours, it's not 15 hours of meetings, of course, it's 15 hours of my time, which typically ends up being about 3 or 4 meetings over a 2 to 3 month period. And it's kind of like an extended interview if you think about it that way. A lot of people have never worked with a financial planner before. They have no idea what financial planning is or what it feels like or what it will be like to work with a financial planner. And also, this gives me a chance to get to know what it's like to work with the client. So during that 15 hours, we do a lot of conversation. We do a lot of data gathering. I do some initial analysis of whatever their top concerns are. Very often their top concerns are investments and taxes. Sometimes it's estate planning. Sometimes it's retirement planning. Sometimes it's education. So I sort of tailor that first 15 hours to their top priorities. And then at the end of the 15 hours, I basically, I have a conversation with the client about what makes the most sense going forward. There's basically 4 options at that point. So one is that they will sort of sign on for my full service model, which is ongoing planning, ongoing investment management, probably what the majority of XYPN members do. Although I don't charge AUM, I have a basically fixed fee pricing structure. And then the second option is ongoing planning without investment management, which basically means that they click the buttons and do all the actual transactions. But I'm still giving all the same advice as the first planning model. The next one is we can do another project. If they want to do another 15 hours or 7 hours or something like that, we can do that. Or I can convert them into hourly. So I just actually started offering hourly recently. I believe it was last year. And it was because it was getting a little unwieldy to have to sign a new project with people every time they wanted to have a meeting. Because I had clients who didn't want ongoing, but they did want to meet with me once or twice a year. And the way that my pricing was structured before that, they'd have to sign a new contract every time. And it kind of got to be a little bit too much overhead for me. And so I kind of moved into this, hourly as needed structure as well. And the reason why I, provide all these services is, I guess I realized operationally it would be easier to have only one service model, but I really try to meet clients where they are and provide the service they need. And some people really want to delegate and they want me to handle their investments for them. Some people really want ongoing planning. They want the relationship where we meet quarterly and, we're in touch all the time, but they really want to learn and they want to manage their investments on their own. And then there's definitely people who just want to check in once or twice a year. And I'm happy to provide all of those services. They all, I feel like they all fit a need and I feel good about providing all of those services because I wouldn't say that I particularly enjoy one over the other. They all have their place, basically.
I'm so glad you bring that up and talk about how you meet clients where they are. I mean, it's not a challenge that you faced in the business, but it was something you were witnessing among certain clients that they didn't need the ongoing comprehensive. And so there was a different service you could pivot to. What's the percentage of clients that will work with you during the first 15 hours that will transition to ongoing?
Let's see. Almost all of them transition to ongoing. The question is whether it's ongoing with investment management or ongoing planning only. In the past couple of years, maybe one or two decided to continue hourly, but almost everybody decides to continue ongoing. Sometimes, though, a client will have been ongoing and they'll say, hey, I think, I'm not really sure that I am that interested in focusing on financial planning, investing, things like that. Could we take a step back and move from ongoing over to hourly? And that's something that I support as well. So, like I said, there's different needs for different people, and I just kind of want to meet them where they are in terms of what they need.
Beautiful. In terms of your ongoing, can you talk a bit about what clients would expect from you on an ongoing basis? How do you deliver the value year after year for long-term clients?
Maybe I'll start first with the initial planning process, which, I'm typically meeting with clients, maybe every 2 to 4 weeks. And it's about 5 or 6 meetings is the initial process. And during that time, I ask for a lot of documents. I review tax returns. I do a lot of education for clients. So I have presentations to sort of teach them about investing, teach them about estate planning or whatever other, topic we're going to go into. And then at the end of that, we sort of go into more of a maintenance phase. For the clients for whom I'm managing their money, I'm doing a lot of work in the background that they may or may not be aware of, but, we still meet something like, 2 to 4 times a year. And I really let the client drive that. So, I have one client who wanted to meet, I think we met something like 10 times a year in the first 2 years. They just had a lot of questions and they wanted to keep talking. And eventually we got to the point where, now we're sort of on a every 3 to 4 month cadence, which is, where I typically am with most of my ongoing clients for whom I'm managing their investments. For clients that are ongoing planning, I typically meet with them quarterly. And then in between the meetings, there's a lot of email outreach. So, throughout the year, there's always things that are coming up. Like, for example, a lot of my clients work for Intel. A couple times a quarter, there's some RSUs that need to be sold. So I'm emailing them and saying, hey, your RSUs just vested. I recommend you go sell them. Or they bought some stock, or they have to make some employee benefit decisions, or they have to, update their 401k contributions. Or I also help all of my clients with tax planning and also helping them with their tax prep. So I would say I don't do tax prep, but I help them collect everything and kind of make sure that they're organized enough to either be able to give everything to their CPA, or if they do their tax returns on their own in TurboTax, then they'll typically upload a draft of it for me to take a look at before they file. And I'm always very careful to say I'm not a CPA, so my tax advice is best effort. But I very often find a mistake or something that they forgot to include, or like this year, a lot of people forgot to calculate their U.S. government obligations, which is any interest that comes from U.S. Treasuries is not taxable at the state level, and Oregon has very high tax, so that ended up saving people a lot of money, which they were pretty happy about. So I would say between tax planning, ongoing meetings, and just kind of reaching out periodically when there's something that they need to do, like it's a pretty high touch service. I would say I'm in contact with all of my ongoing clients like a couple times a month, not a couple times a month, a couple times a quarter for sure.
Beautiful. And I just want to go back to that 15 hourly relationship you have at the start. How do you ask for them to continue on, or is it assumed? I know some advisors have been worried about having a separate signature and a separate contract to ask people to engage in, but how does that conversation go once you finish kind of the first portion of the relationship?
Well, I have learned that I need to sort of keep clients apprised of where they are within that 15 hours, because if I've had 2 or 3 meetings with a client, but I've done 7 or 8 hours of work in the background, and then I tell them, hey, your package is up. They're like, wait a second, I didn't I didn't know that I had used 15 hours yet. So I do tell them, like after every meeting, like, okay, you've used 9 hours of your 15-hour package. You've used 11 hours, you've used 12 hours, whatever. And then when we get to the last meeting where they're going to use up their package, or, the last portion of their package, one of the agenda items on the meeting is, next steps. So how do you want to move forward? And usually we've had conversations prior to that about if they want to continue to have, add investment management, or they want to continue ongoing, or they want to continue hourly. So it sort of comes up throughout this whole process, sort of organically from time to time, but then it's an agenda item on that last meeting, whenever the package is about to expire, basically.
I love the agenda item, having it listed there. People know it's forthcoming.
Mhm.
45 clients is a really healthy number of clients, and it sounds like you're able to spend really meaningful time with all of them. How do you organize the client relationships, like behind the scenes? How do you keep them structured?
Well, I use Asana for workflows, and I would say Asana runs my life. So, I mean, I have like an Asana board for each client, and then I have Asana boards for kind of big, like general areas. Like I have one for compliance work. I have one for, anything related to my business. I have things that are, recurring client work. I have things that are taxes, et cetera. I have one that's just Intel specific tasks. And then between the client specific boards and then the sort of bigger boards, all of those have tasks that kind of combine together into my task list, basically,
Wow.
right? So every day, when I pull up my computer, the first thing I do is go to Asana and say, okay, what are my tasks for today? And usually before I go to bed the night before, I look at my tasks for the next day and say, oh, okay, it looks like I have 15 tasks tomorrow. That's too many. So I need to kind of decide which ones I actually need to work on the next day. And then
Mm.
sometimes when I finish all my work for a day, I'll say, okay, what else is coming up this week? And, would it make sense to, pull in some of those tasks and do them sooner, that sort of thing. So basically, Asana keeps everything organized for me. And then, I've kind of worked on organizing stuff within there in a way that makes sense for me. So I just have like a template board that I set up for every new client. And it has basically all of the work that I will do, or all the topics that I will cover, all the work I will do with a client over the course of our first year, along with workflows and, links to resources and things like that. I don't share these boards with the client. So this is entirely just for my benefit. And then that organizes the work pretty well for me.
So is that in addition to a CRM of your choice, or does this really kind of take the place of the process component of a CRM?
Yeah, I've tried the workflows in kind of traditional CRMs, and I don't like the way they work. So I have a CRM. I use less annoying CRM, but it's basically just like a Rolodex for me. So it has, basic information about, date of birth, address, phone numbers, things like that. And then there's a link from my CRM to, I use Google Drive for all documents, and I have a meeting notes folder for each client. And every time we have a meeting, I create a new Google Doc and it's in there. So I can very easily go and see all the notes that I've ever had, related to meetings with any client. And then also I can go to the Asana board for each client as well to kind of see where we are in the financial planning process. I will say that I just signed up for Right Flows, which is the kind of planning workflow tool within Right Capital, which is what I use for financial planning software. And I'm considering moving some of my planning focused workflows into Right Flows. That's one of my projects for the rest of this year, is to sort of play around with that and see if that makes sense. I've heard a lot of really good feedback from people about Right Flows and how I think it's great to have everything that's sort of client facing and planning focused in one place. So that's what I'm considering, but I haven't actually started working on that yet. So that's a next month project.
Great. I haven't heard of Right Flows yet. And I'm glad you bring that up, and maybe we'll link to them in the show notes. Being a tech person who serves tech people, I'm interested in what other tech you use. What can't you live without?
I do almost everything in Google. So I use Google Docs, I use Google Sheets, I use Google Slides. Of course, that's for all the deliverables that I create. So like I have a lot of, spreadsheets and, sort of written documents that I provide. And then I use Right Capital as my financial planning software. And so all of the projections and, my clients are aggregating their accounts. So we have net worth reports there, and we have, retirement planning. And that way I can sort of keep track of the accounts that I don't have access to, basically. And I would say those are really, and plus Asana for managing my own work, as I mentioned earlier. I would say those are really the top pieces of tech that I couldn't live without.
And then I'm always talking to clients about, tech is very much used to support you as the business owner, and it's not always a direct value add to clients. Have you experienced that, or what's your take on kind of engaging clients with technology?
Most of my clients are from the tech field, so they're very comfortable with technology, and they really like having, they love having spreadsheets that, they can update and I can see their updates and vice versa. So it's kind of like this collaborative workspace. People definitely have been burned through years of working in corporate environments where you're like emailing Excel sheets to people, and then, 5 people are making changes and you can't merge anything. It's a huge pain. So people really like the fact that I use shared documents, and that everything that, that every update they make, I can see, and every update I make, they can see. But I'm not super tech heavy, I would say, in my processes. Like I write out my financial plans, like they're written documents. It's not just like I click a button and it gets created. So, and the same thing with my investment plan. It's like a 5 or 6 page document that is like a narrative structure that talks about, the different aspects of thinking about investing and what the strategy will be. And there's like a very small section about, what the actual investments will be, because that's, of course, as we all know, the smallest part of investing is like which actual investments you choose. The strategy is far more important.
Right. Absolutely. You make it sound so easy, like you've got it all dialed in terms of the process and the pricing and the tech that you use behind the scenes. Are you planning on hiring, or have you outsourced anything yet? What do you feel like is forthcoming for you in that realm?
No, my plan is to keep my business at a size where I can do everything. So I don't outsource anything. I don't plan to hire anyone. I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to have employees. I can't actually think of a lot of parts of the business that I wouldn't want to do myself. That's kind of part of the fun, maybe, of starting my own business, is I got to sort of kind of craft everything to be the way I wanted it to be. And I really enjoy all the aspects of running my business. So, I do my own bookkeeping and I like it. I do my own website updates and I like it. I do my own compliance and I like it. So I don't really see much of a need to outsource anything. And I don't really want to, like, I really love how flexible my life is right now. Like if I want to take a week off and go on a trip with my friends, I just block my calendar and I don't have to worry about what an employee might be doing or things like that. So yeah, I basically don't really have a plan to grow in terms of hiring or outsourcing or anything like that. At some point, of course, I'll need to have an exit strategy, but I'm still many, many years away from that. So I'm not worried too much about that at this point. Maybe one of my kids will want to be a financial planner. We'll see. Or, maybe I would spin off part of the business and just keep part of it. I don't know. But for now, I really love the work I'm doing and it fits very well into my life. And so I don't really see any reason to make any major changes.
Oh, I love that. And I like what you said, that you crafted it to be the way that you wanted it to be. Just from our listeners' perspective, as they plan to launch their own firms, do you have an example or two of a decision you made that you felt like you were crafting it the way you wanted, so you never had to hire someone else, and so that you could continue to say that you love this business?
Maybe one example is I decided not to do AUM based charges. So all of my ongoing fees are fixed fees, which makes bookkeeping and invoicing super simple, right? Like if a client is paying me $10,000 a year, I just send them a quarterly invoice of $2,500 every quarter. And that's it. Like, I don't have to have software to calculate average daily balance, and I don't have to do all this extra stuff that you have to do if you're billing on AUM. Now, of course, a lot of people say I'm leaving money on the table, which is absolutely true. I'm sure that if I was charging AUM, I would be earning a lot more money. However, I think a lot of my clients would never pay AUM. So the types of clients that I have tend to skew a little bit on the, higher net worth side. And they've also typically never worked with a planner before, and they wouldn't pay a 1% AUM fee. So
Wow.
I was actually just looking before the meeting, and for all of my ongoing clients, whether I manage their assets or not, my clients have an average portfolio size of about $3 million. So if that was like a 1% AUM, or even like, tiered down a little bit, that's like 25 to 30,000 in fees. And these clients are not going to pay that, right? So this is the type of client who they're really happy to pay my fees, which are, typically 8 to 12,000. They're not happy to pay a 1% AUM. And I feel like the type of work that I do is worth what I charge. And I feel good about the way that I've chosen to structure this. I don't really feel like, as people get more money or have more wealth, that it necessarily takes more effort on my part. For the most part, from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to $8 million, it's like a little bit extra complexity. It's not double, triple, quadruple. And so that kind of fits really well with both the way I like to think about charging or setting my pricing, but also the types of clients that I attract are people who maybe have more money but wouldn't be interested in paying any kind of AUM charge.
I love the ongoing dialogue that we have on this podcast about AUM and how to conceptualize it, who it's right for, how to price it, how to deliver on the value of it. Um, When I think about your clients, and you said that some of them will take direction from you about the investments, some of them do have their investments with you, but what are the rest of them doing? I assume they're not paying another advisor for managing their portfolios. Are they do-it-yourselfers?
So for all of my clients, whether I'm managing their investments or not, I'm giving them specific guidance about what to do with their investments. So, like, for example, for my ongoing clients where they're managing the investments, I have a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet has, target, number of dollars and percent for every asset class. And then we have a column for every account they have, their Roth IRA, their 401k, their HSA, et cetera. And then it says specifically, in order to meet your target allocation, you should have this many dollars from your HSA and this asset class, this many dollars. So it's a very specific plan. But then because I use Google Sheets, this plan is basically shared with the client. So if they're managing the investments, typically what they'll do is, on whatever cadence we agree, they will go in and update what are my current holdings. And the spreadsheet basically calculates like, okay, you need to add, $10,000 to this asset class and take 5 out of this one and take 5 out of this one. And then either they will make a proposal and say, hey, based on my spreadsheet, I think I should do this. What do you think? And I'll either say yes or no, or explain why I would do it differently. Or they'll just say, here's my spreadsheet. What do I do? And then I'll email them basically what to do. And because they're doing all the work of actually collecting the information and updating the spreadsheet, I can typically look at a spreadsheet and make a recommendation for them in like less than 15 minutes. It's not a lot of work on my part. And that's kind of part of my ongoing service for clients for whom I'm not managing the assets.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about feeling like you have flexibility with your solo firm, because one of the objections I hear most frequently from people about I need to hire, it's so that they can have flexibility and go on vacation. So you have these clients and you want to go away for a week. Talk about how you handle that, and do you communicate that to clients?
Yeah. So my clients all know that I am a solo practitioner, that I have a family, and that I go on vacation from time to time. So it's not a surprise to anybody when I say I'm going to be on vacation for most of July. And so if you want to schedule a meeting, let's meet in June, or here's the 1 week in July I'm available. Typically like what I've been doing the last couple of years is, I block out, almost the whole month of July and most of December off of my calendar. So I have no meetings those 2 months because I do a lot of travel in the summer. And then I like to do kind of end of year planning and wrap up in December, plus, of course, the holidays. So, I mean, I'm always available if there's like an emergency or a client has like a job offer or something comes up, but I'm not kind of scheduling ongoing sort of maintenance work during that time. In terms of getting in touch with me, I'm very comfortable setting up an out of office responder that says, I'm on vacation. If this is urgent, please write back and put urgent in the subject. Otherwise, I'll get back to you on this date. And I would say, I've done that maybe a dozen times in the past couple of years, and I can count on one hand the number of people who came back and said, I have an urgent question, and that can't wait until you're back from vacation. So I communicate up front. I put the out of office responder in. I block out, certain weeks and months from meetings, and it just seems to work fine. I haven't really had a problem.
So it sounds like you do check email just to quickly see, is anything urgent?
Yes. So I do have in July, I'm at a place where there's no internet access. So I do pull out my phone and find the one place in the lake that has a internet connection. Like every 2 or 3 days, I'll check it. I'll let my emails load. I'll quickly scan through. Is there anything urgent? Nope. Great. Put my phone away. But that's about it. I'm not checking, daily or multiple times a day on vacation. It's like maybe 3 times a week I'm checking.
I love that idea of just expectation settings. They know you're a solo firm. They know you go on vacation. So listeners, I think if this is a kind of lifestyle practice that you want, that kind of clarity up front is both attractive to those clients because they want to live similarly, but boundaries and expectations are so important for people who are engaging your services.
Yeah, and my clients go on vacation too, and they also want to enjoy their vacation while they're on vacation, right? So they totally get it. They're not expecting me to be available 100% of the time.
We're so lucky to have you in the network and on this podcast. And Linden, I'm just wondering, given the number of years you've been doing this, have you seen any thematic shifts among clients or their needs or their desires around how to be served? Like, what's your take on just how the industry has changed since you've been in it?
That's a great question. I would say one thing that only becomes more important over time is tax planning. We think of investments and we think of sort of projections and retirement planning as, the main deliverable here. But taxes are so stressful for people. And if you can help them understand it, help them feel less anxious about it, help them have control over, and even just know what to expect when it comes to taxes. I spend a lot of my time doing that. I mean, I'm doing, like I said, I have a document that I create every year for every client. It's called, 2024 tax notes, and it has 15 sections or so that basically is anything that we did together that is going to affect your tax return. We make a note of it. And as the year goes on, we add to it, we review it. And then when the time comes to do their taxes, they give that information to their CPA, or they use it to guide their own prep, basically. But also just looking at pay stubs and projecting out their withholding and telling them, hey, you need to make estimated payments, or you need to change your withholding, or things like that. I would say that doing that type of work is like, clients are just so appreciative of it. And only more and more so over time. So again, I'm not a CPA. I don't do tax prep, but I do my own tax return. And so I feel like I have a good understanding of, at least the type of tax situations that I've encountered. And so I'm able to either speak with the clients or speak with their CPAs. And I do talk directly to almost all of the CPAs of my clients. And the CPAs find that very helpful as well. So I would say just having a great relationship with, like having an option for your clients in terms of tax prep, but then also just reaching out and talking with whichever CPA they're working with, if the CPA is willing, is a huge value add.
And I imagine you being highly niched here. I mean, for a majority of the time you're running this firm, you're working with a large majority of your clients are Intel employees. So there is some similarity. I assume there's some consistency among their tax needs.
Yes and no. I also work with a number of retired clients, and then I work with clients that work in other fields, other tech firms, a few attorneys, things like that. So I would say it's very much the same, but then there's also some things that are different. Some of my clients are business owners or consultants or that kind of thing. So things are a little bit different there. But then again, I'm a business owner, so I know what that looks like from a tax perspective. And when I don't know the answer, I do have resources and, CPA that I can work with, or if the client has a CPA, I'm very happy to talk to the CPA and have them explain to me, what I don't know. And then I just get to always be learning, which is great.
Well, on that topic, what resources do you recommend to some of our listeners who maybe haven't launched their firm yet, but are thinking about like ongoing professional development? Is there books, or their podcasts, or their conferences? Like what's your go-to for staying up to date?
Well, of course, Michael Kitzis's blog and podcast are extremely helpful. I like the Longview podcast on from Morningstar. I listen to that one. I read a lot, so I don't really consume video much, but I listen to a lot of podcasts either when I'm driving or exercising, and I just read a lot. So like academic papers, journal articles, blogs. I'm part of a couple of study groups, and we're always sort of sharing ideas and resources to read. So, and luckily, I'm a very fast reader, so I'm able to get through a lot of material very quickly. And so I would say just, I just kind of explore wherever my interests sort of lead me. I just sort of read more and more and more. Like I just read a book about safety first retirement planning, which was all about, it was by Wade Pfau. It's all about adding income annuities and life insurance and things like that to an investment only perspective on planning. And, these were all things that I had been aware of and used to some extent, but it was interesting to see another kind of very strong proponent of this being kind of like the best way to do planning. And I'm sure that it will sort of inform my approach going forward.
I love that. I always appreciate when advisors are able to talk about and passionately about how they stay up to date, because what you hear when you answer that question is just how, quite frankly, you're interested in this, and what a gift to be able to run a firm on topics that you're genuinely interested in.
I know. I think I would read all these articles and all these books even if I wasn't running a financial planning business. So it dovetails very nicely.
It sure does. So, as we kind of wind down our last couple minutes of this podcast, I'm interested in what the long view is. Not to take the language of that podcast, but what's the long play for you here with this business?
Well, I'm not necessarily looking to grow significantly at this point, but I'm open to growing in a sort of slow and measured pace at this point. I can see that I might get up to 50, 55, maybe even 60 clients. I don't think I'll ever get to 100, 150. That's just too much for the type of work that I do. And then I don't know, like I said, maybe one of my kids will be interested in financial planning, or maybe there will be another planner who wants to run a business the same way that I do, and I could picture a partnership someday. I could also picture at some point saying it's time to sort of back off a little bit and downsize my business and, have it be a smaller number of clients and a smaller number of weeks and months that I'm working. I have 2 teenagers, and they have another 4 or 5 years while they're home. And, my life is what it is while home with teenagers, right? Like, I'm home, I'm with them, they're going to school. But once they're both away at school, my life might change a lot. So I could see doing a lot more travel, not being home as much. And I think that there's a good chance that the business might shift around that time frame as well. But I'm kind of open to what happens next. So I'm just kind of curious to see where this goes from here.
Oh, I love it. Well, if you could speak directly to our listeners, what advice do you have for them as they prepare to get into this? Maybe they are sitting at a job like Intel thinking they're about to jump. What advice, and I'm certain you've been asked this question before on the podcast, but you now have additional 5 years of knowledge here. What would your advice be?
I think my advice would be maybe not to try to do like a one size fits all service. I know that very often we try to streamline things by saying like every client is going to go through this process, right? But that kind of assumes that all of your clients need the same process. And I guess it depends if you want to try to have a process and find clients that fit that process, or find clients you want to work with and then sort of tailor the process to the clients. Obviously, it's a lot more efficient to do it the same way for everybody, but I find it's very interesting to do things a little bit differently and really try to kind of customize and tailor for people. And I find that clients really, really appreciate that. Just in terms of flexibility of saying, I really want to work on this and this is very important to me. Great, let's do that next. So I find that, just sort of being responsive to and asking the question of like, what is it that you actually want to work on right now, leads to really strong relationships with clients.
Your cool, calm, and collected nature, I think, is a beautiful example of what you can get when you build intentionally and you follow that advice you just gave, which is, giving yourself enough flexibility to serve the needs of the clients and not immediately trying to rush into a firm that really outgrows you, quite frankly. And we coach a lot of advisors once they're kind of the house is on fire state, how to wind down a little bit and get a little bit more room to breathe and research and serve better. So thank you so much for everything you've done for our community, and certainly for what you've done for this industry. I did say that you are one of our more referred to members on the podcast.
Yeah, which is actually what made me think of even coming back on again.
Love that. Awesome, Linden. Thank you so much for being on with us today, and congratulations on what you've built and your jump into full time.
Thank you, Maddie.